Warning, this video obviously contains many spoilers regarding the content of Team Cherry's Hollow Knight, an amazing game that you should not have spoiled for yourself. If you have yet to play the game, I highly recommend turning away now and playing or watching a playthrough of the game first. All content after this warning will be highly revealing of the game's many magical moments. Proceed at your own risk. Hollow Knight was one of 2017's best games, if not best game. That's pretty impressive considering it had to go up against some amazing titles such as Super Mario Odyssey, A Hat in Time, Cuphead, Breath of the Wild, Nier Automata, PUBG, and Sonic Mania. That's a lot of really amazing games in the past 12 months, and it's no surprise Hollow Knight got swept under the rug for a lot of people, especially coming out a week before the highly anticipated new Zelda game. But Hollow Knight is no slouch. With beautiful art, an eerie and impeccable composed soundtrack, and lore that'll keep you thinking for weeks, this game might be the closest and best thing you'll ever get to a non-Dark Souls game. Actual Dark Souls, not meme Dark Souls. Please people, you're killing me here. Unlike Cuphead, Hollow Knight actually has the atmosphere and lore to capture that Soulsy feel. But does it stack up difficulty-wise? You're damn right it does. This is certainly one of the hardest games of the year, and again, that's saying something. The difficulty almost never feels like a burden, however, as the clear mechanics and tight controls will always leave you knowing that you took damage because of your mistake, not the game's. This comes out best in the game's numerous boss fights, of which there are over 30, but what are the best of the best to get your gaming gears grinding? I've somehow managed to whittle down the varied cast into 10 top-notch battles that made my blood boil in the good way. Remember, these are my opinion only, and include bosses that were in the base game, the Hidden Dreams update, and the Grimm update. Feel free to let me know whose your favorites are down below. I'd also like to note that this list is based only on gameplay, as some bosses would unfairly get higher spots if lore and build-up were considered. Quick note, this list will include fights that I have yet to get to in my blind playthrough, since that was pre-recorded and I wanted to get this up in time for Game of the Year lists, so be warned if you've only been following my series. Spoilers ahoy, let's shove off! Number 10. Elder Who. Taking the number 10 slot is Elder Who. The Warrior Dreams in Hollow Knight can be pretty hit or miss, but Elder Who is definitely one of the hits. While Galleon and Markoth are likely more difficult fights, Elder Who captured the twitchy, quick reflex battle style I love perfectly. The endless stream of golden bracelets slamming down from above have you focusing more on staying alive than hitting the Elder, who just floats around the arena in a familiar pattern. The sound effects here work great, and this is one of my favorite fights for utilizing the dash to avoid damage. While Elder Who may be pretty easy and predictable, his quick attacks have you thinking on your feet in an incredibly enjoyable burst of adrenaline as you search for an opening. This is my favorite one of the Warrior Dreams fights, just straight up. Number 9. Grey Prince Zote. You know I love me some Zote, but this fight is seriously just too good to pass up, favoritism aside. The Grey Prince is likely the most hilarious boss fight in the game, and it's backed up with some solid patterns of difficulty. Much like the White Defender, Grey Prince Zote can get overbearing fast at higher difficulties, to the point where he will kill you in one hit. That's pretty intense, but the anticipation of seeing what the lumbering buffoon is going to do next keeps me coming regardless. Unlike a few of the bosses in Flukmarm, Grey Prince Zote's ads actually feel like a solid accompaniment to the fight that force your attention across the entire screen rather than just the movements of the big bad. Also, they're really, really funny. Just look at this thing. I don't know why it exists, but I'm glad it does. Beating the prince in his pleasure palace feels good when you can actually do it, and the journey's always a good time on this one. Also, it's Zote, and that means I can't put the regular Zote on this fight because it's not really a fight. Did I just say fight? I did. I meant list. I practiced reading this script about as much as Zote practiced being a person, which is not at all because he's a bug. But regardless. Number 8. Hornet. Everyone's favorite bug tsundere is one of the few characters you'll fight more than once, and while both of her battles are great, they can be for very different reasons. A lot of people find Hornet to be the first big obstacle in Hollow Knight. I know I did. Without the dash, you're missing a lot of integral mobility that lets Hollow Knight's bosses get more complex. As such, the fight is actually pretty easy and a snooze fest on future runs, but that doesn't stop you from being a sit and duck on playthrough 1 if you're terrible at Metroidvanias like me. The magic this fight brings to the table is often the player's first real taste of the game's difficulty and gets you slobbering for more. Hornet's second fight is a lot more route, although still interesting. At this point in the game, you'll have a good chunk of the damage and health upgrades, and likely all of the movement abilities. If you haven't been exploring every nook and cranny of the game, this fight can be just as awesome as the first, plus a bunch of new flashy abilities from both sides. Unfortunately, if you're anything like me and explore the world every chance you get, you'll probably find Hornet's second fight a bit of a pushover and not nearly as enthralling as your first encounter. But still, just like with Zode, it's Hornet, and she's getting in DLC soon, so I mean, it's gotta be on the list somewhere, right? I mean, she's just a fun fight. It's just really fun. Number 7. Broken Vessel and Lost Kin. This one's a double entry, but I'd argue that the two fights are functionally similar, albeit with very different difficulty levels. So, I'll allow it. It's my list after all. While Lost Kin's difficulty will vary widely on how many upgrades you've obtained before the fight, its moveset is pretty much identical to the Broken Vessel's, who's a bit more stationary in the player power curve. Thus, it's easier to talk about the boss's mechanics with Broken Vessel, which I will now promptly do. BV's move pool is pretty simplistic and easy to read, but far from easy to dodge. The speed at which it'll move after a signature tell makes the fight doable once you've learned the cues, but quite difficult if you have trouble picking them up. Another instance of great adds, the infected balloons force you to be aware of your surroundings other than the boss, and also make healing nearly impossible without some great timing or synergistic charms. Like seriously, Defender's Crest breaks this fight. Probably what makes this fight so good for me though is how fair and balanced it is. The Broken Vessel is essentially a knight just like you, and its moves parallel yours really well. Among all the bosses, Broken Vessel and Lost Kin give me the feeling of a duel among the best in the game due to the similarities in your move pools and weapon choice. Fighting a rival in a one-on-one clash is a great feeling in games, and I personally believe that Broken Vessel provides a much more wholesome rival experience than Hornet, at least in terms of actual fights. Unfortunately, this guy doesn't have much lore-wise, but I still think he deserves a spot above Hornet. Number 6. The Watcher Knights. Hollow Knight has a pretty good design philosophy when it comes to difficult fights. If it's in the main story, it's generally reasonable, with the super hard stuff usually being optional. Not so with the Watcher Knights. These guys are likely the hardest non-optional boss in the game, and it's great. They're hard enough that there's even a way to permanently kill off one of the knights before entering the battlefield to make the boss easier. Mechanically, these guys are pretty simple. They just roll around and slash a bit. The fight is anything but simple though. The battle is one of attrition, as every time you beat a Watcher Knight, you'll be forced to fight 2 more at once. Every time one dies, they get replaced by another Watcher Knight, up for a total of 6 foes. With only a couple open windows for replenishing health, having to go up against these guys one after another is a test of out-surviving them. Heck, I went into this fight with every damage upgrade and most of the health upgrades. They still managed to kick my ass. There's nothing like a desperate battle against a horde every once in a while, and if the fight were optional post-game material, it would be pretty mediocre. In the main story though, these guys stand out as a gateway of skill. Really impressive fight here. Even though the mechanics aren't great, the difficulty makes up for it. Holy crap. Number 5. Soul Tyrant. If you fight the Soul Master early on, you're probably going to have a hell of a time beating him. The endless teleporting and barrage of soul projectiles will keep you running in circles while slowly putting a dent in this jerk's health pool. Once you think you've won, the game pulls a huge FU and throws you into a fast-paced second phase. You're probably going to die at least once. This would be okay if the trek back to the fight wasn't so goddamn long and dangerous, but it is, and Soul Master can be one heck of an eyesore if you're going up against him blind. His fight is super solid though, and that's why the Soul Tyrant is such a cool boss. Completely avoiding the backtracking mechanic of his non-dream predecessor, the design philosophy behind Soul Tyrant is, you should have all the moves by now so we can throw even crazier shit onto this dude. Even faster and more frantic teleporting, tons of more soul balls bearing down on you, and ground pound fake outs the world likes of which the world has never seen before makes the Soul Tyrant boss fight a steady stream of hellish fun. Not to mention, he's got even more health this time. The fight feels like a crazy epic showdown with tons of bullets and jukes without punishing you more than usual for losing the fight, which really feels great. Number 4. The Radiance. Obviously the Radiance was going to show up somewhere on this list, and I'm actually impressed she's not higher. I mean, come on, this is the big bad of Hollow Knight and by far the hardest and most epic fight in the base game. I mean, I know I said this list wasn't going to include build-up or lore, but that's practically impossible to ignore for the Radiance. The infection has been a constant presence since the moment the first cutscene started, and this fight does not disappoint. Instead of talking about why the Radiance is such a good boss, I think it would be faster to say why she's not in the top 3. As cool as this fight is, unless you happen to be some kind of golden god of Hollow Knight, it will probably boil down to a DPS fest of abyss streaks during the first 2 phases. Don't get me wrong, you need a dodge too. Every attack here deals 2 damage, so you are invariably going to be taking more damage than you deal if you don't dodge. I also heavily dislike the RNG of the first phase. While the second phase of the fight is more difficult, a skilled player will be able to work around the Radiance's attacks and get damage in. During the initial phase of the fight, however, if you're unlucky enough, you will be able to do very little damage for long periods of time while being forced to do nothing but evade attacks. Nothing wrong with this in theory, but it doesn't feel very good, especially when almost every other fight in the game allows for a certain level of maneuverability when it comes to dealing damage in most situations. Not to say this is a bad fight though. 4th place is frankly amazing when you're competing with 30 other heavyweights, and making this the final boss of the game was an amazing decision on Team Cherry's part. No hate here. Number 3. Failed Champion. Failed Champion is the dream boss version of the very first boss of the game, but boy if they aren't worlds apart. Much like the Radiance, every hit you take in this fight will deal 2 masks worth of damage, which means that every mistake gets punished really heavily. Amazingly enough, however, being pitted against this enormous hunk of metal still feels fair in its own way. The Failed Champion has almost all the same tells as the False Knight, meaning they're super easy to pick up on and dodge. The fight feels very David and Goliath while still making openings and no zones obvious. This guy might be huge, but with perfect reflexes, you can juke his every attack and obtain a flawless victory. Slip up even once though, and you're in for a world of hurt. It feels damn good even when you lose. You can see exactly where and why you screwed up and fix your mistake on the following run. This is what huge lumbering bosses in games should try and be. Number 2. Nightmare King Grimm. Oh man, this fight is insane and I have so much to say about it. Nightmare King Grimm takes everything the Radiance did wrong and does it oh so right. While both fights against Grimm are fantastic outings, the Nightmare King definitely takes the cake because of how much more difficult and rewarding the battle is. His attacks have obvious tells, but this dude is fast, so you're probably gonna get upending hit just the same. Oh yeah, and each time you do, you're gonna be taking 2 massive damage, just like the Radiance and the Failed Champion, so you'd better stock up on those soul hearts. Not only does this fight manage to be much harder than the Radiance, but it avoids being a DPS fest as well. Grimm's razor quick attacks keep this match fast and furious, with your damage being entirely based on tiny openings if you want to survive through his 1600 HP. Abyss Shriek can still be used to fantastic effect, but your chances are far fewer in number and require actual planning rather than the trigger-happy style that works wonders against the Radiance. This fight is, in my opinion, the hardest in the game, and as such, it is definitely aggravating at times, as some of his attacks are harder to dodge than others and their order is random. Yet, I still find myself having fun on every failed run. Also, this might just be me, but it's really aggravating when you have no indication of how far you've gotten into a fight when you lose. Not knowing how close you were and how much more you have to improve can feel really bad. Nightmare King Grimm doesn't have this problem because he only uses his bullet hell attack when reaching 75%, 50%, and 25% HP, meaning you have a pretty clear indication as how far you're getting into the fight. I absolutely love this. Over the 3 hours it took me to defeat the Nightmare King, I could clearly see myself getting better at the fight as I was consistently hitting his first, second, and third flame spawner attack. After learning Grimm's attacks, each attempt honestly feels like a feverish dance, which fits beyond perfectly in regards to the character. This is honestly the most fun fight in the game, and bonus points for making Sharp Shadow useful. I love this charm, but few bosses allow such a feel-good usage as Nightmare King, as you frantically shade cloak around the screen to avoid damage. Honestly, this could be number 1, but seeing as the Grimm Troop is an expansion, I feel bad putting it above a fight that made me fall in love with Hollow Knight and Team Cherry. I don't know, consider it a draw? Seriously, this fight is fantastic. Now, before we get to number 1, it's time for an honorable mention, and we're talking about Dung Defender. I wanted to take a quick moment before getting here to number 1, as Dung Defender was originally number 10 on this list. When the Grimm Troop expansion came out, I just had to put the Nightmare King at the top of the list, which pushed everyone else back, and unfortunately, pushed Dung Defender right off. His fight is still super fun and accessible, so I wanted to make a quick mention. It's really easy if you're new to the game, and there's spots in the level that you can just sit and heal in, which makes it really nice since it's one of the earlier fights in the game, and especially with the White Defender in the Hidden Dreams expansion, this guy also offers things for people who are really good at the game and are looking to get beat the hell up. So I wanted to say, Dung Defender, I love you. Grimm, you go, man. Anyways, on number 1, Doma Doma. Number 1, the Mantis Lords. This might seem somewhat of a strange pick for the best of a best in a game where every single boss battle can really be described as an art form or fluke marm, but I'd argue that the Mantis Lords have the most fluid difficulty curve and mechanics in Hollow Knight. Right off the bat, this is probably the first time in the game you get to challenge a boss yourself and get thrown into an enclosed arena with environmental hazards. The music is absolutely superb. Seriously, this is one of the best themes in the game as far as I'm concerned. Then the actual battle starts, and it's good. Much like some of my other favorite bosses, the Mantis Lords have clear tells followed by quick movements. There's a fair amount of time to prepare for an attack, but if you haven't moved by the time the animation ends, you're gonna get hit. The Mantis Lords aren't even that hard, as there are obvious gaps perfect for healing, but only at precise locations. As a new player, these might be hard to locate at first, but finding perfect moments for healing is actually incredibly satisfying this early in the game. The Mantis Lords also have perhaps the best difficulty progression of every fight in the game. Most bosses will use the stagger function, where after a certain number of hits with the nail or any kind of spell, they will stagger, giving you a chance to heal or continue doing damage. However, the Mantis Lords don't stagger. Once you learn the attacks the Lords use in a one-on-one duel against the strongest Lord, you're assaulted by both of the weaker Lords at once. The patterns only slightly change, but suddenly you have the game knowledge to dodge this boss's attacks, but you have to do it on the double. This is an amazing mechanic that I wish was used in the game more often, if at the expense of the Lord's uniqueness. Much like I've talked about successful adds in a couple of the previous fights, combating two Lords at once forces your attention across the entire battlefield while trying to pinpoint attack cues and openings. You're not required to have many upgrades by the time you get into this fight, so the battle's very simple. But sometimes, working with simple is best. It can create some of the most interesting and unique difficulty curves for new and veteran players alike. I really think this is the best boss in the game, and the fact that it's optional and you can fight it at any point means that if you're not good enough, you can come back later, and I really think this is for new players the best fight in the game for this reason, and I think veteran players can enjoy it just as much. I know every time I play through Hollow Knight, I look forward to this fight so much, and I really think they deserve the number 1 spot, even above the amazingness that is Nightmare King Grimm. Alright folks, well that's 10. If your favorite boss wasn't on the list, I'd actually be pretty surprised, as I think I hit all the knockouts somewhere on here. If not though, let me know what you think in the comments. As long as you don't think Flukemarm is the best boss, your opinion is completely valid, because every boss in this game is awesome as heck. In fact, the game is awesome as heck, so if you haven't played Hollow Knight, okay, first of all, why did you watch this video? I just spoiled practically the entire game. I even gave you a warning. Why are you like this? But also, second point, go buy this game. This is a good game. If you're not into spending money and you'd rather watch someone else play it, I'd certainly recommend my own playthrough with no ulterior motives, which you can find here, as well as another top 5 list I did for Hollow Knight's areas. If you liked the video, consider hitting the like button and subscribe to see more. I'll see y'all later, so go have a wonderful day, and go play some Hollow Knight. Game of the Year 2017, game of all the years, frankly. I'm just saying. Also, if you're watching my series, I still haven't even fought the Hollow Knight, so sorry about that. Unless you're watching this in the future, in which case I have. In which case, ignore this. Bye.